Hey students, welcome to the Great Gatsby Chapter 1 review. Let's go ahead and get started. So, the narrator of The Great Gatsby is a young man from Minnesota named Nick Carraway, and his name is significant. If you think caraway being carried away, getting carried away, it kind of indicates something about his character that he might get carried away with the events of the novel, and you'll see that kind of unfold. So keep that in mind as his character develops. He not only narrates the story, but he casts himself as the book's author. He begins by commenting on himself, stating that he learned from his father to reserve judgment about other people, because if he holds them up to his own moral standards, he will misunderstand them. And so this is how Nick opens up the book. And Nick is interesting as a narrator because he's both a narrator, he's the author of the book, and he's also a character in the book. So he's very thoroughly involved. He interacts with the other characters. He has full control over what information is shared, and that feeds into our activity on whether or not he's a reliable or an unreliable narrator. If he has that much control over the book where he is the author, remember he's not actually the author, Fitzgerald is, but Fitzgerald has intended for Nick to be perceived this way. Is if Nick is intended to be perceived as the author, if he's intended to be have full control over how the story is narrated, but if he's also interacting with the characters, how much can we trust what he tells us? Does he have his own agenda? Does he have his own biases? And if he does, how is that supposed to kind of color our understanding of the other characters and Nick himself? And so when Nick says that he's learned from his father to reserve judgment about other people, because if he holds them up to his own moral standards, he'll misunderstand them, it's essentially saying the idea of like, while Nick has a certain sense of morality, he doesn't expect other people to have that same sense of morality because everyone's born in different circumstances, and therefore he doesn't judge people if they do things that he thinks is wrong. And that's going to be really important to the novel because a lot of the characters in the book are very immoral. They're doing things that we would consider wrong, and yet Nick doesn't judge them for it. And it's up to you, the reader, to decide if that's a good or bad thing. Is it good to withhold your judgments of people when they're doing something wrong and to try to be accepting because everyone has different senses of morality? Or should you stick by your morals and judge people if they're violating them? And so Nick is a very interesting character. Some of you guys are going to find him reliable. You're going to agree with his point of view. And some of you guys are going to find him very unreliable and disagree with his point of view and how he interacts with the characters of the book. So keep that all in mind. It's this pretty complex narration, which is why we have a whole activity on it. But keep that in mind when we consider Nick. All right, let's keep reading. He characterizes himself as both highly moral and highly tolerant. He briefly mentions the hero of his story, Gatsby, saying that Gatsby represents everything he scorns, but that he exempts Gatsby completely from his usual judgments. Gatsby's personality was nothing short of gorgeous. And so we have a little bit of a paradox here where Nick both scorns Gatsby but also thinks he's amazing. And so that's really confusing, and it must go into this idea of judgment, where Gatsby must be doing something that Nick would normally consider immoral, but because he's withholding his judgment, he gives Gatsby a chance and instead finds really amazing things about Gatsby while giving him this chance. And so all of this is foreshadowing. It's all very ambiguous, which means it's vague. We're not quite sure, well, what is Nick not judging? What has Gatsby done wrong? What have maybe the other characters done wrong? None of that is clear yet, but we know from the very first pages of this book that there's going to be immoral characters, that Nick will be interacting with them and telling us about them, and that he will be reserving his judgment and not judging this immorality. So that's where we begin. All right, so is Nick a reliable or unreliable narrator? I can't answer this for you. This is an opinion question. and one that you'll need to think about as you read the book. But I want you to keep it in mind with everything that Nick tells us from his perspective. Do you find it reliable or do you find it unreliable? And also, a secondary question is, do we know yet if he's a good or a bad person? And so Nick has a sense of morality, but he's reserving his judgment and not placing his morality on other people. Some of us are going to think that's a very good quality. Some of us are going to think that's a bad quality. So right now, consider whether or not you think Nick is reliable or unreliable, but also a good or a bad person. Consider his character. All right, let's keep moving on. So in the summer of 1922, Nick writes he has just arrived in New York, where he moved to work in the bond business, and rented a house on a part of Long Island called West Egg. Unlike the conservative aristocratic East Egg, West Egg is home to the new rich, those who, having made their fortunes recently, have neither the social connections nor the refinement to move among the East Egg set. West Egg is characterized by lavish displays of wealth and garish poor taste. Nick's comparatively modest West Egg house is next door to Gatsby's mansion, a sprawling Gothic monstrosity. So when you get to this part of the book, you're going to be reading about eggs, and sometimes students get really confused. They're like, what about eggs? So these are not real eggs. These are descriptions of islands that are shaped like eggs. So there's two islands that are oval in shape and they're right next to each other. And one is West Egg, so it's the western island, and one is East Egg, so it's the eastern island. And so there's something very distinctly different about these two. So East Egg is old money. So these are aristocrats. These are people who have had money in their family for a very long time. And so they're wealthy because their parents and their grandparents and their great-grandparents and so forth were wealthy. So they didn't have to work for their money. And so they're kind of seen as refined and proper and used to being wealthy. Now on West Egg, that represents new money. So these are people who didn't grow up wealthy. They earned their wealth. And therefore the wealth is kind of considered more garish, which means tacky and in poor taste. And they show off their money and they kind of spend it on extravagant things and are very showy about it. And so Gatsby lives on West Egg. He has new money. And it's not quite clear how he came into this money. And remember that we already know that Gatsby's done something immoral that Nick decides to kind of not judge him upon. So that might suggest the fact that this money has come from an immoral action. But he lives on West Egg, and Nick has moved into a small house right next to Gatsby's mansion, which is how they meet. They're neighbors. Now on East Egg, that's where Daisy Buchanan and Tom Buchanan. Daisy Buchanan is Nick's cousin, and Tom Buchanan is Daisy's. Okay, so Daisy Buchanan is Nick's cousin, and Tom Buchanan is Daisy's husband. And so that's how they all know each other. And so that couple lives on East Egg. And so their money is very different. And so their outlook on the world is very different. Questions. Of the two islands, which one represents old money and which one represents new money? We just talked about that. So East Egg represents old money. West Egg represents new money. On which island does Daisy and Tom live? Well, they live on East Egg. And on which island does Nick and Gatsby live? They live on West Egg. So Nick is unlike his West Egg neighbors, whereas they lack social connections and aristocratic pedigrees. Nick graduated from Yale and has many connections on East Egg. One night he drives out to East Egg to have dinner with his cousin Daisy and her husband Tom Buchanan, a former member of Nick's social club at Yale. Tom, a powerful figure dressed in riding clothes, greets Nick on the porch. Inside, Daisy lounges on a couch with her friend Jordan Baker, a competitive golfer who yawns as though bored by her surroundings. And so in this chapter, we're introduced to a lot of our major characters. And so Daisy, who is Nick's cousin, she's very flirtatious. She's very charming. She jokes around. She kind of plays as though she's dumb, but it becomes quite clear that she's not dumb. She just pretends to be dumb sometimes. She plays ignorant ignorant because it's more convenient, and she's actually quite witty and she understands what's going on. And then she has her husband Tom, and Tom is this very aggressive. He used to play football and that was like the best time of his life, and now he's super bored because he doesn't have anything to do. He's very pushy, and it's implied in the first chapter that he's actually having an affair. And so he's cheating on Daisy. And so right off the bat, we don't really like Tom because Daisy's so charming and Tom's hurting her. And Daisy knows that he's having an affair. But like I said before, she kind of plays dumb because it's more convenient and easy for her than having to confront kind of like how crummy her marriage is. Tom is unlikable for other reasons as well. Not only is he overly aggressive and a cheater, it's also revealed in the first chapter that he's a racist. And so Fitzgerald utilizes these to make us strongly dislike Tom. So Fitzgerald was very anti-racist for the time period, and therefore he uses the fact that Tom is a racist to make him quite clearly an antagonist. All right. Oh, and then there's Jordan Baker, who will become a more important character later, but she's a competitive golfer, and essentially what you get about her is she's quite apathetic and lazy. She doesn't care about anything, but Nick kind of likes her. So what kind of person is Tom? We talked about that. He's aggressive, he's a cheater, he's a racist, he's our antagonist of the novel. What effect do the billowing white curtains and glimmering crystals and diamonds have in the movie scene? We didn't watch the movie scene, but in the scene that introduces Daisy and Jordan, it describes how there's like white billowing curtains in the room, and the women are wearing white dresses that like balloon up with the air. And so the purpose of that is it's supposed to make Daisy and Jordan seem angelic. They're covered in like glittering things and white cloth, and the room is glittering and there's white cloth, and so they're supposed to seem very innocent and angelic, and this is their initial characterization as these angels in the room. And so we'll see if that sticks. Are they actually angelic, or is this just kind of our initial impressions of them? Remember, this is all being told through Nick's perspective, and so he perceives them as being angelic. Are they though? We'll find out in the story. And if you would actually like to see that scene, I've also posted these slides for you to look at. You can go and click on the link and watch the movie scene that describes that. And so what I want for you to consider is, what might the color white symbolize in the story? You have your color tracker. So when you might pick this scene for the color white, consider what it might symbolize. All right. So Tom tries to interest the others in a book called The Rise of the Colored Empires by a man named Goddard. The book espouses racist, white supremacist attitudes that Tom seems to find convincing. Daisy teases Tom about the book, but is interrupted when Tom leaves the room to take a phone call. Daisy follows him hurriedly, and Jordan tells Nick that the call is from Tom's lover in New York. After an awkward dinner, the party breaks up. Daisy and Nick go for a walk, where Daisy expresses her dissatisfaction with her current life. Later, Jordan wants to go to bed because she has a golf tournament the next day. As Nick leaves, Tom and Daisy hint that they would like for him to take a romantic interest in Jordan. And so these are things we already talked about. It's just reiterating the fact that Tom is our antagonist. He is a racist character, and that's used to further antagonize him with the readers. That Daisy knows that he's having an affair, and that now we kind of know that Jordan might become a love interest for Nick. And these characters, there's a lot of problems going on with them. Like, their flaws are really evident. Tom's flaws are the worst. Daisy, her flaw is that she plays ignorant even though she knows what's going on. Jordan's flaw is that she's a little bit lazy and pushy. But there's also likable things about Jordan and Daisy that make their characters somewhat redeemable. So you get to decide whether or not you like them or not. All right, so our final question is, what does Daisy mean when she says the following about her young daughter? I hope she'll be a fool. That's the best thing a girl can be in this world, a beautiful little fool. So while Daisy is talking to Nick, she says this about her daughter. Daisy and Tom have a little girl. Consider why Daisy would say this about her daughter. So Daisy says this about her daughter because Daisy is a woman living in a world where she has no power over her own life. If she divorces her husband, Tom, it'll only cause her pain and not him pain. And she'll lose her status. She'll be judged by the people around her. And so she has to pretend not to know. And she hopes that when her daughter grows up, her daughter won't be aware of how unfair things are and instead can be happy. And there we go.